A lioness collapsed at the feet of a grizzly bear, her cub clinging to life. Just steps away. No one could believe what she did next, and even fewer could believe how the bear responded. What happened in the middle of that forest wasn't a fight for territory. It was a plea for mercy, and the world would never look at wild animals the same again. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring more inspiring stories like this to you. The sun was setting over the northern rim of the Bitterroot Mountains. That golden hour when the light turns everything it touches into gold and shadow. Deep in the forest, silence reigned. But silence in the wild doesn't mean safety. It often means something is watching. A grizzly bear named Boone, known by rangers for his unusual tolerance around other wildlife, lumbered slowly through the high pines. Scars along his flanks told stories few had witnessed. But Boone didn't look for trouble. He avoided it until that day. The wind carried a sound no bear should have cared about. A cry, not a warning. Not a threat, a plea, sharp, desperate, motherly. Boone stopped. Below, in a clearing torn by panic, a lioness stumbled through the brush, her chest heaving, eyes wide with terror. Foreign to these parts, clearly escaped or released from a defunct wildlife facility. She was out of place, out of strength, and out of time. Behind her, a whimpering cub, barely able to stand. Ahead of her, a silent grizzly. Most predators would see each other as rivals. One would chase the other off, or worse. But the lioness did something unthinkable. She lowered her head and crawled toward Boone, her entire body trembling with desperation, not aggression. She didn't growl. She didn't bare her teeth. She begged. Her cub wheezed, collapsed in the ferns behind her. Poisoned perhaps, or snake-bitten. Something was killing it. And Boone, he just stood there still watching. Then with one heavy breath, the grizzly turned away, not to leave, but to walk toward the cub. Above, a red-tailed hawk circled once, screeched, and flew off. A storm was coming, and no one in that forest, not man, not beast, could have predicted what Boone would do next. The air grew still. Boone stood a few feet from the trembling lioness and her cub, his breath visible in the cooling air, the sun slicing gold through the treetops. His massive chest rose and fell slowly, not with fear, but with deliberation. A grizzly bear knows what a wounded animal smells like. Boone knew, and he knew the lioness had no fight left in her. She had given herself over to fate. But the cub was still alive. The grizzly stepped closer. His paw landed beside the cub with a dull thud. The lioness flinched but didn't move. She simply whimpered, a low, mournful sound that pierced deeper than any roar. Boone leaned his head down, sniffing the cub's flank. The little lion's breath was shallow, its eyes barely open, its body limp from whatever venom or sickness gripped it. And Boone paused. He looked at the cub, then up at the lioness, then back down again. No one can explain what happened next. Not the wildlife researchers who later studied the scene, not the ranger who arrived hours too late. Because what Boone did defied every predator instinct known to man. He sat right there beside the cub, not to dominate, not to feed, but to guard. The lioness, stunned, crept forward inch by inch until she could press her muzzle against her cub's tiny chest. She let out a deep, guttural breath and collapsed fully beside Boone. For the first time in hours, she didn't look over her shoulder because the bear had become her shield. As the wind picked up and clouds thickened overhead, Boone rose again. He moved off the trail briefly, his nose in the air, searching. A few minutes later, he returned, dragging something in his jaws. Crushed root, possibly wild ginseng or angelica, known by locals to have some healing effect on infections and bites. Boone dropped it beside the cub, then sat again, watching, waiting. The lioness didn't understand what it was, but she didn't question him. In that moment, her fate and the cub's belonged to the grizzly. They stayed that way for hours. Boone would occasionally stand, sniff the cub, then look around as if waiting for danger. A wolf cry sounded in the distance, but none came near because the smell of bear kept them all at bay. The lioness fell into a light sleep, her body curled protectively around her cub. And Boone, he stayed awake, unmoving, unblinking. When the storm broke that night, heavy rain falling in sheets, Boone stood like a monument, his thick fur absorbing the water as he shielded the mother and cub beneath the trees. A predator, a protector, a paradox. Rain lashed the forest like 1,000 tiny whips, tearing through the canopy and soaking the earth until the ground turned soft and treacherous. The air smelled of pine and electricity. The storm was no longer just above, was inside the forest now. Boone stood motionless. His hulking body was a barrier against the worst of it, shielding the fragile lion cub. And the lioness still curled tightly around her baby. Each time thunder cracked, she winced. But the bear never flinched. He watched the treant. He listened, because Boone knew something was coming. Hours into the storm, movement. Low, silent, calculating. A shadow darted between two trees. Then, a second. Wolves, graybacks, the forest's quiet assassins. And Boone could smell it. They were hungry. The storm had disrupted their hunt, and now they had caught wind of something unusual. Something weak, a lion cub, a lioness. Too tired to fight, and one bear. Boone stepped away from the shelter of the trees and moved to higher ground. His silhouette rose in the moonlight, like a statue of war, a warning. But wolves don't fear symbols. They test. A young male crept closer, teeth bared, body low. Boone waited, then exploded forward with a roar that rattled the air. Trees echoed with the sound, and rain scattered like mist around his charge. The wolf skidded back, stunned. But it didn't run. Neither did the rest. Boone stood his ground, his chest heaving, breath loud and wild. The pack circled. They weren't foolish, but they were desperate. The lioness, sensing what was happening, tried to rise. He couldn't. Her legs buckled, her ribs too sore, her spirit too spent. Boone glanced back at her just once and he ran toward the wolves. It was chaos. Snarls and fur and rain all tangled in seconds. Boone swung his paw with crushing weight, sending one wolf sprawling. Another lunged at his flank and was tossed like a sack of moss. But it wasn't a victory. It was survival.